this is going to be a really exciting conversation between Zappy's president, Ryan Barry, and CEO of Drift, David Cancel, talking about all the things you can learn about a SaaS company. I don't want to take up too much of their time, but because it is the first session of the day, really, really quick housekeeping. If you've been with us yesterday, you already know all this, but just in case not, you are all on mute. Obviously, that's because we have keynote presentations, but please do engage in the chat. It's already vibing. I'm loving it. Keep that going there. And when we get back into the Cadence platform, you can keep the conversations going there as well. We obviously want as much interaction as possible. That's what makes Virtual Insight Summit so special, even though we can't be together in person. I also want to give a warm welcome to Ariana from Ink Factory, who is joining us to be live drawing all of our 4 feature sessions today, as well as the diversity and inclusion programming that we have this afternoon. If you watched her do that yesterday, it's really cool. She'll be screen sharing. You can just make it kind of small and watch her as Ryan and David talk. It's a great way to have a little bit of visualization because we're doing a no slides event. And we're really, really excited to have her here with us. All right, everyone ready to rock and roll?
Let's do this.
Let's do this. Over to you, Ryan.
2 quick things for me before we start. Number 1, happy Earth Day, everybody. I'm going to post a link in the chat shortly. We are matching every dollar people donate as a company. And I'm also really excited to share that we as a company are committing to people, profit, and planet, and we'll be soon filing for B Corp status. It's a really exciting day. Get out and do something good for the world today. It is a great pleasure to introduce my friend Dave Cancel, and there's a degree of normalcy in this because Dave has a flight to catch today. And it's really, his heart rate is up because he's got a flight to catch, but it does give me some hope that the world is returning back to normal. Dave, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing this morning? Oh, you're on mute. Not that normal yet, folks. We still have to drop it. You're on mute.
Sorry, I do this all day. I don't know what happened. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So for those of you who don't know Dave, Dave is a 5-time founder. He's exited a business into IPO as well as many other capacities. He's the entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School. He's also a scout for Sequoia Capital, which is one of the most prestigious venture capital firms on the planet. He's also a really great human being, and I'm really excited to talk with Dave today. There's a lot big business can learn from some of the practices that are happening in software. Dave is not only an incredible leader and mentor and friend to so many, but is actually a technical founder first. And I think there's a lot we can learn from how software actually gets built. So Dave, let's not assume everybody knows what Drift is. Tell us in a few words what Drift is really all about and what you're trying to achieve.
Basically, what we do at Drift is we're trying to reinvent the marketing and sales funnel and all the software that happens to go with it from a buyer-centric view. So think about everything from CRM to marketing automation to your website and how your buyers interact with you today. We focus specifically on highly considered goods, which is largely B2B, but we're trying to reinvent that because we think we've gone from a world where the company could control the funnel and the process to a world where the buyer controls that process. And so it's very exciting. We're in the early stages of that transition.
I dig it. You got some super fans in the chat, maybe some fanboying and girling, no big deal. There's something that I've heard you say publicly that I want to talk to you a little bit about, and it's this notion of the now economy that we live in. What does that mean?
It's something that we all live in. Everyone on this call, everyone lives in it in their personal lives, but we forget about it on the business side. And what I mean by that is now we live in a world where, because of this, and I'm holding up my phone, all of us expect everything now. So we 24/7, 365, we want to buy the way that we want to buy. And, obviously we do that through Amazon, but we do that almost in everything that we do. I want to be able to order an Uber or a Lyft 24/7. I want to be able to book a flight. I want to be able to go on a trip. I want to be able to do everything 24/7. But when it comes to business and we look at our businesses, we run on a 9 to 5, not weekends, no holidays, please, schedule, which worked in a world where the company could control the process, i.e. there were very few competitors to what you do, alternatives to what you do. But we live in a world now where everything can be fast copied and there are endless alternatives and for every dollar from the buyer. So in that world, you have to turn your business so that it's 24/7, 365, and it's there when your buyer wants it to be there.
So as somebody who works in the B2B space, how has that changed the way you run your company and the way you build teams and products? I mean, how has it actually changed the way you run the place?
Well, for us, we've had to for ourselves and for our customers, we've had to reinvent from a software standpoint and from a process standpoint, every piece of the funnel, because we used to live in a world not too long ago where you could have a website as a business. You could have no way for a buyer to contact you, make them fill out a form so they can download an ebook or get some PDF or some information that was hard to get, but now information is readily accessible and your buyer usually knows more than some of the people inside your company, unfortunately. And you used to make people wait. So if we think about it, we used to spend all this money on demand to generate demand from a brand standpoint, from a demand generation standpoint. And then we get people to the website, and we think about the website as your store, even if you don't actually sell anything on it. And we get them to the store, and when they got to the store, there's no one there. Fill out a form, go back home, and just wait for the magical day that we contact you and say, Ryan, we're ready to sell you something. And so that is the way that the world worked. And so for us, what it means is we have to transition that to how do we take something that's highly dependent on people, which is a lot of B2B businesses in terms of selling, right? You can't just put a complex product in your cart, like on the e-commerce side. How do we make that available 24/7? How do we make the buyer feel like they're in charge? They can dictate the buying process, that they get answers when they want them 24/7, back to the now economy. And how do we do that? And we've done that through a series of technologies that we've built. We built everything from real-time presence to chatbots. A lot of people know us for chatbots, both in email, website, and lots of other places, to be able to meet the customer and the buyer where they are when they want to hear from us.
I dig it. I mean, so I've been a customer of Drift for a really long time, and the customer centricity point, it lands with me because I feel it, not just because I know you. I mean, I texted one of your product managers over the weekend and got a message back. It's like, and I don't think that you're promoting workaholic syndrome. I just think they care, right? So how do you balance when you're governing and leading the organization, the autonomy people need to be that close to the customers, but also the accountability you have as an entrepreneur who's raised a ton of money and has a cap table that has some really high profile investors on it. This is a high stakes game you're playing. I also know you to be somebody who really finds autonomy to be a superpower in your business. So how do you balance those tensions?
Well, I think, for us, it's all about this tension between autonomy and accountability. And, for myself, I'm an entrepreneur. That's all I've ever done, right? I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just, as people have told me, I'm pretty bad at being told what to do. So I wanted this ultimate autonomy, right? I wanted this freedom in everything that I did. And I wanted to create an environment, meaning Drift, where everyone had that sense of freedom, that sense that they could, do the best thing for the customer. And so, the more that we thought about it, we thought like autonomy comes with equal parts of accountability. It's kind of like a balancing act. And a lot of times when people are talking about autonomy, what they're really talking about, in my opinion, is anarchy, because they want freedom, but they don't want any responsibility. They don't want Ryan asking what they're doing. They don't want anyone to check in on them. They don't want to be transparent in what they're doing. And so that's not autonomy, right? That's anarchy. We want autonomy, equal parts accountability. And the best accountability that we found, and I accidentally stumbled upon many years ago, was if we can move everyone in the business as close to the customer as possible and measure everything from customer terms inward. If we can do that, then we can give people more autonomy, because we know that we're measuring things in customer terms. And as those metrics get better over time, that the customers are having a better experience. And that's all we need to know. We don't need to know dates on a certain release, on what version we're going to release, or any of these kind of things, which we typically look at it from a product standpoint. What we need to know is, are we getting better with our customers? Are they happier over time? And of course, we see that in terms of them buying more over time. Then we can give more and more freedom, more and more autonomy to different parts in the organization, which is our goal.
I dig it. And so what are some of those customer metrics that you're actually using? I mean, I think it's fascinating. And this isn't just for people who work in technology on this phone call. You might sell cereal, you might sell soda, but you still have R&D people that are trying to innovate and build products. So how do you make customer metrics relevant for an engineer or a product person and give them the fluency to understand how that actually matters?
Sure. So there's a whole bunch of customer metrics which you can run down, but the one that I look at the most important one to me is one where is a highly qualitative one, where it's like, how much time are people, everyone on the team, including myself, including every person, every engineer, every product person, everyone on the team, no matter what their role is, how much time are they spending in a week, month, year with customers? And we measure that on a daily basis. We measure that on a weekly basis, monthly basis, etc. And what we're looking to see is that not through proxy, not through, we ran an analysis or we ran a survey and this is what we heard. That's proxy, right? What we want is direct. How many times have they talked to Ryan? That's why that product manager cares so much about talking to you on the weekend, which is up to that product manager. We don't encourage people to work on the weekend, but I don't. And so we want them to be close to the customer, because that is when, and this is what I accidentally stumble upon, that's when you feel the pain. That's when the truth comes out. That's when, you feel, especially someone in R&D or someone who's usually in the back of the office, that's when you feel the effects of what you're doing each day and what that really means for the business. Otherwise, you're seeing everything through layers, through proxy, and it's easy to get too insular. It's easy to get too focused on your metrics, your dashboard, your thing, without understanding what is the connection of that to the end thing, which is we're all in business, and business only exists to serve a customer, nothing else. And the key word is serve. There is nothing else. That a business is a made-up concept. There is no business. There is no company. There is no structure. It is only here to serve. It's a group of people trying to serve a set of customers, and that's all we do.
I dig it. And I think what's great for this audience to hear is we have a lot of high-end researchy insight signal type tools, but there's something so simple of we did a session yesterday of scrappy research. There's something so simple about go stand outside the store and chat to your customers and just see what's going on. And I think sometimes we get in our business lanes and forget how simple that concept that you just.
It's the most important thing, because not only you need to feel it viscerally, but you also need to hear the words that they're using, not the words that you want to use, the words that they're using to describe their problem, not your problem, their problem. So you have to feel it and get into the words. And by the way, from a marketing standpoint, some of the best copywriting you can do is to literally take the words of your customer and use those in your copy, because that represents your buyer. Those are the words inside their head. That's how you get that inception moment with other buyers who are just like them, because those are the words that they're using in their head that you may not have, that you usually don't have as a company.
In my opinion, it's one of the easiest big wins that software, any technology or insight space could learn. Who cares about AI and neural network? No one gives a shit about that stuff, yet we all put it in our websites. So I love the notion of using their words, not your words. So I want to change gears a little bit. I want to talk to you about experimentation. You have a CFO who bets on experimentation. How does that work in your organization, and what does experimentation mean to you?
I think we're constantly, internally we say, innovate, don't invent. So we choose to invent very few things, the things that are super meaningful. And those are the things that we largely experiment with. And then those are new products, new ideas, new approaches to the market. And those come from the customer. But we also experiment by constantly innovating on existing practices. And so for us, we are looking to take everything that we do, every problem that we look at, whether it's an internal problem, how do we structure a team? How do we comp them? How do we organize them from an org chart standpoint, or externally from a product standpoint, go to market, branding, etc. We invert everything and we start with the buyer first. How would the buyer think of this? How would the buyer, experience this? And so try to reinvent every process from a buyer-centric view, which is simple, but it's not easy. It's simple conceptually, but it's not easy to do, because most of the processes that we've been taught within a business, both from an external marketing standpoint, but internal kind of how you run your business, are company-centric. They're about us. They're about what metrics we care about. So we invert everything in customer metrics, like we talked about earlier, one way we do it, but like, we invert every practice and say, okay, if we were going to start from scratch, what would be the best experience from a buyer standpoint? And then what would we do? That goes down to like how we experiment, how we comp, people in sales. Everything starts from the buyer. And so because of that, we're forced into this world of constantly experimenting and questioning everything that we do, whether it's innovation or whether it's wholesale invention that we're trying to do.
And on that, I think what I enjoy about some of your thinking, and I've had a chance to get to know you over the years, but you're not scared of red ocean markets. And for those of you who don't know what a red ocean market is, there's a lot of competitors. And if you sell food, soda, cell phones, burgers, chicken sandwiches, software, research tech, it's a red ocean. That doesn't scare you though. In fact, you like red oceans, don't you, Dave?
Mm-hmm. I run to red ocean. So there's a book that we're referencing where this concept comes from. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's an old book. Many of you probably read it, but in general, it says, there's this concept between blue oceans, and blue oceans are one where there aren't many competitors. Red oceans, obviously, because there's a lot of blood in the ocean from competition. And there's two ways to read that book. One is to constantly try to invent markets, and so, try to invent a market. I know a lot of people that look at it that way because there's no competitors in there. And then there's another way, which I look at it, which is to say, it's not about inventing a new market. It's by taking a red market, and you want competition, because by definition, that means that there is a market, right. a market that has no competitors and nothing in it, is not a market, right? So like maybe you wait long enough for that to become a market, but that almost never happens. You look at an existing market that is bloody with competition, and you look at a change in the world, whether it's a change outside of technology, outside of your company. This is not about building a better product. This is about a change happening in behavior in the market. And we've all, because of COVID, have gone through the biggest change ever, which is why we're doing this virtually right now. And you look at that and say, okay, does that give us the opportunity, because there is a new behavior happening out there, to resegment this existing red ocean and to find a blue ocean within the red ocean? And so you always want competition. You always want a lot of demand, because that means that there's customers. That means there's money there. That means that people care about that problem.
I love it. It's a really important insight, I think, because there's already boats in the sea. You can just reframe it. Okay, so you've had the experience of actually working in a very big company just before Drift. So chief product officer at HubSpot, business that you had founded, had gotten acquired, and then you wanted to take that business and help bring it public. What are some of the things that you've learned at HubSpot in a big environment that you've had to either unlearn or double down on as you've gone to found Drift? Because I feel like there's probably some unlearning that you had to do within that environment.
There was definitely unlearning. I'd say from a learning standpoint, I think, we got to witness the power of, and, I am historically a product and an engineer kind of founder. And I got to learn and see like a magical sales and marketing, especially the marketing standpoint, marketing machine that was built there. Not only in the way that we built the team internally and how it grew but also like the effect it had on the community, the closeness that it had to community, and this like raving fans that it created out in the world, from everyone from partners to, your average marketers, who's learning in school, right along that whole spectrum. And I learned a lot about that and how much that mattered and how important it was to start to, although we didn't use these words at HubSpot, we use them at Drift, but like to really think about things from a brand standpoint, to build affinity. That's something that is common, obviously, in the B2C businesses here, but in our world in B2B, that didn't exist. There was no notion of brand, about building brand. There was no notion about affinity to a customer. There was none of those concepts existed in our world. We were a demand generation, lead focus kind of market, right? B2B. And you competed mostly, at least in our world, mostly from technology, from a services standpoint. And that was enough to build a moat in our world. But when we started Drift, we said that, and what we learned from HubSpot was that, that world was over now. Right, there was too many competitors, and this was the inversion that was happening from customer to buyer-centric paradigm. that there were too many competitors in the world. It was too easy to clone anything, from direct to consumer to B2B, like anything can be cloned. Everything is easy to copy at this point. So you have to build a brand, you have to invest in a brand. And that is one thing that we started to learn the beginnings of that at HubSpot. We unlearned, there was plenty of things to unlearn, but those things had to do more with scale and where we were at the beginning of the company. And now as we're scaling the company, we're relearning some of those, slightly different, innovating on them, but relearning some of those lessons. It's all about understanding the context of when to apply lessons. And I think that is something that, at least myself, that you miss often, right? You learn about these, you go through these experiences that you have personally, or that you learn secondhand from someone else, but you have to remember that those things apply to a specific context, a specific point in time historically, or a specific size of company or problem, and they can't be just generally applied to different times, different size companies and things like that. So the only thing that's universal is how you treat people, how you lead people. That part's pretty universal because we're all humans and have the same basic needs.
That's incredible. I love the context of where you're at in time to apply lessons. I advise a CEO personally, and he wants to build all these scale-up systems, and they're like a $2 million company. And I'm like, don't worry about that. It's not the time to worry about that.
Later.
It's a later thing. So I guess a question that prompts into my mind when I'm listening to you talk is, so now Drift is 7 years old, 8 years old?
No, we are 6 years old, not 7 yet. Yeah, 6 years old.
I'm basically just overinflating Dave. I thought 100 companies.
2015 January is when we started.
And how many employees do you have as of today?
500 and some odd. We'll be 750 by the end of the year.
So this is really accelerated growth. And so how do you, as you're bringing in these lessons, which are scale up, different types of people, new executives, how do you balance that scale up thinking with the essence of what makes you great, which is your culture, which also feeds into your brand? How do you keep those things constant?
Man, that's hard work. I'll tell you that. That's where I spend all my time. And I think, we have had a culture of kind of teaching from the very beginning. And so we've always, built curriculum. And I use that word specifically, like curriculum, not just like, meetings and some decks and stuff. We've actually built curriculum like you would think about in school from the early days. And most of it started from an onboarding standpoint and to teach, but also from teaching the way that we write, the way that we think about building a brand, the way that we communicate, like everything that we did, we tried to build into this curriculum, which was like, speaking about your friend there, the person you advised, like it was too early for us to do some of that stuff, but it, probably when we did it, but it paid off for us as we started to scale pretty quickly. And so we continue to do that. Some of that we then make available external to our partners, customers, community, and we have Drift certifications and all types of marketing and sales, approaches. And some of that stays internally, but we continue to, myself and my co-founder, Elias, like we continue to spend a bunch of time either in recruiting or, the other half is how do we build curriculum? How do we teach? How do we communicate these lessons? Because as we scale, like how do we keep that thing that made us what we are? And we codified those in the early days in terms of our leadership principles. And so we do everything from our leadership principle, from the way that we onboard, the way that we comp people, the way that we promote. They're constantly being used each and every day. And that's helped us so far. But I'm sure there are new lessons we need to learn.
Well, it's every time I hang out with you, I love that you're always learning. You're taking your phone out and writing notes. And I think it's a cool humility that you've got. So I'm completely off of our pre-planned questions because I'm just enjoying this conversation. So we'll just throw the paper out. Let's talk about rituals and how they play a role in culture. Rituals and artifacts. I know they're really important to you. And I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out how do they find the right rhythm of communication with people. So what does it look like in your world?
Yeah. So we, for us, I will say, and to comment on your last comment, like, I'm always learning, and we built a culture of learning, not necessarily because of, humility, but because we learn through pain and failure so many times. And I don't want to keep learning from pain. So like, you have to be humble. You get humbled by that, or, the world humbles you, and then you have to learn, from other people. And so that's why we're the way we are. So rituals are something, back to curriculum, back to the beginning, back to the leadership principles. Like rituals were something that we wanted to really focus on at Drift. And ritual is different to us than a meeting or whatever. Ritual is something that we do in our that people can come to expect something from, right? Like new people can come and be like, oh, this is, when we do this event, together, this is where we get to do XYZ. This is when we get to present. This is when we get to, learn about this part of the business, learn about this part of the customer, get together, bond with different groups. So like we invest in a lot of rituals. We have a set of rituals that have stayed the same from the very beginning of the company that are core to how we run the business and how we start each week and how we end each week. And then how we check in, every quarter and every year and how we do that. And then there are new rituals that we're adopting all the time. Luckily for us, like most of our rituals have translated, not all, but most have translated well from a physical to a virtual world. And some have gotten way better because of the virtual version of them. And so, and then of course, there are some that have gone away for now because we can't get together physically.
So give me an example of a couple of them. So you have, I think there are a few different times a week.
Yeah, we have something called, the first ritual that we developed, which was the most important, was something called show and tell. And we do that every Friday, and that's the end of the week. We do that 3:00 on Fridays. And basically show and tell is where it started at the last, when I was at HubSpot, where I wanted to build, you have external customers, but you also have internal customers. You have your go-to-market teams, you have everyone that product and engineering should be working with and communicating with. And so I wanted to tear down the walls. And so I started something called show and tell, where there was every month, here's every week. We would have a meeting, we would invite all those teams to it, and eventually the whole company would come to it, and we would show things that we had built that were live that customers were using. That was the rule. You couldn't have anything that was a demo or a concept or whatever. It was like real customers are using this today. And so that started then, and then that morphed at Drift to be, the whole company. So the whole company does this. It's self-organized. It's like the most fun event you have to see. It's more like a game show than anything else. I don't organize it. None of the leadership team organizes it. None of the leadership team are allowed to even speak at it. Like, it is organized by the company. It is the most fun thing ever. It's really quick. It's really fun, and everyone has a good time at it. And there's awards and there's things and that, and everyone presents what they present. Each functional team presents what they've done that week, but from a customer standpoint, from a buyer standpoint, not from an internal process standpoint. And they get applause and they win and they do all this kind of stuff. That bookend, that's the end of the week. The beginning of the week, we start with something called Monday Metrics, which is 20-minute meeting where we just get on the same page from a metric standpoint. Again, customer metrics only on how we did in the previous week and what we need to do for this week. So that's like, okay, we're going to get ready. Everyone, all 500 plus of us are on that meeting, and this is what we got to get done this week. And then we bookend the week with kind of a celebration of what happened that week.
I love it. So for everybody who works in a big company, they're probably like, how do I get a job at Drift? Because this is the way big companies that are growing like crazy are being run. And, Dave, you're just an incredible visionary. But let's pretend you actually had to be told what to do, and you worked for, I don't know, let's pick on somebody. You worked for Nike, and you ran into this is all great, but we've always done it this way. I think we've talked about this, whether you describe it as black box thinking or someone's been institutionalized. What advice do you have for people listening who maybe run a smaller team or a part of a bigger enterprise and are trying to navigate black box thinking? There's only one rule to your answer. You can't say quit and find a new job. They have to.
I will never say that. No quit. Team no quit. We've had to do this at Drift, not inside the company, but externally. We had to do it to kind of like bring the market, to try to like educate the market at the very beginning of why we're addressing this problem, what this big problem is that we're trying to deal with, and series of problems. And that meaning from, moving from customer to buyer-centric world. And what we do is we rely heavily, and this is what I would do inside of fictional Nike, is rely heavily on telling a story. Instead of coming at someone and saying, this is wrong, or that sucks, or we need to do it. Just tell a story and we always do it from a buyer-centric standpoint, but you can do it from an internal standpoint, and just bubble it up to the highest level. And then when you do that, when you tell a story in the most simplest terms, like that you would explain to your kids or something about a process, about a problem that you're having, it helps the other person connect to it. It also helps draw out how ludicrous the problem is, right? Like how ludicrous, like the approach that we're taking is. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it makes people stop and say, oh, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense, versus getting entrenched and saying, hey, Ryan, what you're doing is wrong. Ryan, we need to redo this thing. Instead, do whatever the end result that you want. For us, it's always the buyer that we're trying to solve for. We look at it from the buyer standpoint, and then we describe the existing problem that we're trying to solve, or the existing process that they have to go through. And then you say, wow, this is insane. Why would anyone do this? This is crazy. Okay, that wakes up people usually to be like, we need to rethink this. Then you have to figure out, okay, how do you meet in the middle? How do you get there incrementally? Because you can't just throw everything out. But at least that puts them in the same place that you are. And for us, it always starts by telling a story.
I dig it. And you ground them in the customer, so the ego is sort of minimized in that.
That's the key. We externalize it. We externalize it to the customer. That way it's not their ego. It's not you versus them. It's like, we're trying to solve for this over here. Look at how this person is experiencing us.
Right. We're both trying to solve for that, right? Cool. So let's get on that. Yeah. All right. So Dave's heart rate is going to go from 90 to 110 for the last two questions, because he has to board a flight in 25 minutes. I'm going to ask you two more questions, Dave. I'm going to get you on your way. The first question I have for you is about constants. We've spent a lot of our time talking about change in this conversation. What, in your view, isn't changing with people? What are some of the things that remain true of human behavior?
Yeah, this is, from a marketing standpoint, this is where we spend a lot of our time, which is, and I did this accidentally because I wasn't a marketer. I had to learn marketing. And I started to study human decision-making, cognitive biases, social psychology, all these kind of things. Basically, how do we make the decisions that we do, and why do we make those decisions that way as humans, right? Forget about business, forget about anything. Why do we need that? What are the emotional needs that we have? What are the biases that we have? What are the traps we fall into? And that is the constant that you should focus on. You should focus on people and the things that they need from an emotional standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint, and really focus and understand that. That will make you a better marketer. That'll make you a better leader. That is everything, because we get lost in technology and techniques and tactics and all this kind of craziness and things changing or whatever. There's only one thing that hasn't changed. That's people. And the needs that we have are the same. They're basic needs that have not evolved, right? We have not evolved from a need standpoint. How we implement that might change, but like our needs haven't changed. And that's the thing to study. That's the thing that get good at. That's the constant that will always be there.
So to validate your point, I about 2 years ago, I read Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. I read it when I was in like 5th grade, by the way, but I read it again. It was written in the 30s. I don't remember when. Yeah. Everybody on this phone call, if you reread this in the next week, which you should if you haven't, it was written in the 30s. Nothing in that book is outdated. Not a single thing.
This is the liberating thing, which is once you understand that the people part of the equation has never changed and is not changing, then you can start to learn from history, even though it was different then, it was a different approach, it was different. You keep convincing yourself that it was different, but it wasn't different because the needs of the people were the same as the needs of people today.
It's just the delivery, and we all get mired in the delivery mechanisms and the toys and the technology and the features and benefits, and we're still people. All right, Dave, one more question for you, and you're going to get on this flight. You're going to get to Austin, Texas today and have some hopefully barbecue for everybody from Boston to Austin. Okay. Everybody is always trying to better understand CEOs. Like you're like these mythical creatures. What are the signals you rely on? And what's the best way to get someone in your seat's attention?
For me, it's very simple. It's always the buyer, like that's all I'm here for. Like, I believe like I said earlier, we're in service of the buyers. So like time you talk to me from a buyer centric standpoint, I'm there. I'm there. And so like, if you talk about it from an internal process standpoint or a political standpoint, or like anything that I think starts to sound too political, I might tune out. But if you start from, here's what we're trying to do, again, like we just said in the last one, here's the end thing that we agree on. We're trying to do this for the buyer. Here's the problem. I'm there.
All right. everybody, we are going to cut this a few minutes short so that my friend Dave can catch his flight. Follow him on LinkedIn, sign up to his One Thing newsletter. Every single weekend, he drops knowledge on people. And if you aren't engaging conversationally with your customers on your website, you should be. Hit them up and they will help you out very easily. Dave, good luck catching your flight, and really thank you for the time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone. This has been awesome. See you in Austin.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy.
Yeah, thank you so much to Dave, to everyone for joining, Ryan for leading that awesome discussion.